Hi Valley family, this is Pastor Jim and I'm coming to you for one purpose, and that is to remind you that life groups begin in September. Now, if you've never yet joined a life group at Valley, now is the perfect time for you to join. And I can say from personal experience that joining a life group at a church is one of the most important steps in growing in your faith with God and others. Now, if you've never been a part of a life group at all before, that means you probably have a lot of questions. So allow me to answer 3 of the most common, frequently asked questions I hear from people about life groups. First, what's the purpose of life groups? Well, life groups can have a variety of different benefits for the believer, but the primary purpose of life groups at Valley is to live life together in Christian community. We do not want your experience with Valley to just be you show up on a Sunday morning and that's it. We want you to really feel like you're a part of a family. And one of the best ways we can have that happen is to place everyone in smaller, more intimate communities in which they can get to know one another, study God's Word together, and pray for one another. Question number 2, what happens in life groups? And that's a great question. Honestly, I can understand how if you're an outsider, it may feel like you're showing up some sort of cultish clique that meets in someone's basement, and who wants to do that? Luckily, we only have one group like that. I'm kidding. Life groups typically last between 1.5 to 2 hours. And even though the format varies from group to group, most of them generally follow this format. First, they take some time to catch up with each other, to get to know one another, just to talk for a little while. And then they follow that up by answering the application questions that are always found on Sunday mornings inside our sermon handouts. At the very back page, Pastor David or whoever's preaching provides a list of questions that the small group, the life group, will go through that week. After they've answered these questions, they typically end with a time to hear prayer requests and to pray for one another. Now, some groups serve communion and some serve food, but overall, they should sound a lot like to you, small mini churches. And that's exactly what they are, providing an opportunity for you to grow deep spiritual roots in a smaller community where you can use your spiritual gifts. Question number 3, how do I choose the right life group for me? That is a great question. And I would say 2 things. Number 1, you need to pick a day and a time that you know you can commit to. If you work till 8 p.m. at night, do not pick a group that tries to meet at 6 on Thursday evenings. You know you're not going to make that time. So pick a day and a time that you say, generally speaking, I can always make that time. And then we ask you to commit to that time for 10 weeks. And don't worry, we'll be posting all the days and times of all of our groups coming up this week. So be looking for that. Now, secondly, you got to find a group that you actually click with. Now, that may sound very not spiritual, but it's really important. You're going to be tempted, first of all, to choose the group that's the closest one to you with the least travel distance. And I completely understand that. But more importantly than geography is the group of people you'll be meeting with. And you want to find some people that you just enjoy hanging out with. Quick story, when I was a pastor in South Carolina, I wanted to get out of my Christian bubble and meet unbelievers in a setting other than the church. And so I thought really hard about it and found out the local library had a book club. I love to read and I thought this would be perfect. They'll meet me, I'll meet them, they'll find out I'm a pastor, maybe they'll let me share my faith with them at some point. We'd develop friendships. So I read my book diligently and I showed up for that very first day of book club. And when I walked into the room, there were 15 to 20 older senior citizen, all women, staring at me as if an alien had walked into the room. Now, I wasn't offended by that. I also felt very uncomfortable, and I knew very quickly that this was not going to be the group that I probably clicked with. Now, were they friendly? Absolutely. They welcomed me into their circle, and I sat right in the middle of all of them. But because of the age gap and the gender difference, and I was the only male in the room, it was very awkward. Not just for me, for them too. So nothing against either one of us, we simply knew this is not going to work long term. Now, finding a group that you click with takes time. It's always going to be awkward at the beginning. So that's why we encourage you to stick with a group for 10 weeks. And when that group takes their 10-week break, that's when you can simply step away. And no hard feelings at all. We understand how that works. And then after the break ends, you can jump into the next group and try a new one. We are excited about life groups helping you grow in your Christian faith. And you need to also remember that God is going to use you in that life group to help someone else grow in their Christian faith as well. We look forward to seeing you in September in one of our life groups.